The flickering glow of the television screen cast long, dancing shadows across my cramped living space. At 22, I'd made the pragmatic decision to rent the downstairs apartment of my parents' house. It was a trade-off, really. The financial freedom was undeniable, a welcome buffer as I navigated the murky waters of early adulthood. But privacy? That remained an elusive dream. Even when my parents were off on one of their frequent weekend getaways, a phantom sense of their presence lingered, a constant reminder that my dominion was merely a temporary lease. Friends over, a girl, even just a quiet evening alone with a book, it all felt under an invisible microscope. The apartment itself was a subterranean lair, connected to the upstairs by a solid, lockable door at the base of the staircase. Down here, it was an open-plan affair, the miniature kitchen flowing seamlessly into the living area, a setup designed for efficiency, not grandeur. Beyond that, a short hallway led to my bedroom, a modest bathroom, and a laundry room. A side entrance, rarely used, opened directly into the living room, a convenient but forgotten escape route. This particular weekend, the stars had aligned. My parents were gone, leaving me with the rare luxury of uninhibited noise and genuine solitude. My closest friends, Anthony and Jay, were sprawled on the oversized sectional couch, a relic from my parents' previous living room that had found new life in my basement abode. We were in our element, shooting the breeze, cracking open a few beers, and immersed in the furious pace of a hockey game. The volume, usually a muted whisper, was cranked up, the thumping bass of the music vibrating through the floorboards above. I wouldn't say I was completely wasted, but the subtle hum of a good buzz had settled in by the time the final buzzer sounded. The unspoken rule when my parents were away was to leave the connecting door to the upstairs unlocked. It seemed pointless to secure it when there was no one to worry about unexpectedly dropping in. Plus, the main fridge upstairs was significantly larger and, frankly, just worked better for storing a full case of beer. Anthony and Jay, having both indulged, decided to crash. The couch, a leviathan of comfort, could comfortably accommodate 3 people if they managed to align themselves correctly. After a night filled with boisterous laughter, animated hockey commentary, and the clinking of bottles, I bid them good night and retreated to the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom, ready to succumb to the embrace of sleep. A few hours later, I was wrenched from the depths of slumber. The darkness in my room was absolute, the silence thick, yet I knew instantly what had disturbed my rest. Footsteps. Distinct, rhythmic thuds echoing from the floor above, directly over my head. My initial thought, a lazy assumption born of sleep-addled logic, was that one of the guys had ventured upstairs, perhaps seeking a cold glass of water from the larger, more convenient fridge. It was a common occurrence, a mundane late-night pilgrimage. So I shrugged it off, or rather, my still groggy mind did, and closed my eyes again, willing myself back into unconsciousness. But the silence that followed was brief, punctuated by another sound just a couple of minutes later. The gentle, almost imperceptible click and soft friction of my bedroom doorknob. Someone was trying to twist it. A jolt of unease, faint but persistent, snaked through me. My bedroom door was always locked. It was an ingrained habit, a simple, automatic gesture learned from years of cohabiting with a large family. Why were they trying to come in? My eyelids remained stubbornly shut, a deliberate act of feigned sleep. I was too tired, too comfortable in the warm cocoon of my blankets to engage. If I just pretended to be oblivious, I reasoned they would eventually give up and return to their slumber on the couch. It sounds odd, I know, to simply ignore a potential intrusion, but in that hazy space between sleep and wakefulness, the effort of interaction seemed insurmountable. And surprisingly, it worked. The twisting ceased. The soft clicks faded. Silence descended once more, unbroken. Shortly after, I drifted back into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, the apartment felt different. The air was thick with the lingering scent of stale beer and pizza. Anthony was already gone, a phantom departure, but Jay remained, a rumpled heap on the monumental couch. The clink of the fridge door as I reached for a bottle of water roused him, his eyelids fluttering open, a slow groan escaping his lips as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "Hey, were you trying to get into my room last night?" I asked, my voice still raspy from sleep. He blinked at me, a confused frown creasing his forehead. "Nah, I don't think so, man," he mumbled, his memory clearly a casualty of the previous night's revelry. "Honestly, I don't remember much. Got pretty hammered." His answer, or lack thereof, satisfied a fleeting curiosity. It didn't feel like a big deal, not then. We ventured out to a local deli, the aroma of sizzling bacon and brewing coffee a welcome antidote to the lingering haze of alcohol. Bacon, egg and cheese sandwiches in hand, We returned to my backyard, the crisp morning air and the warmth of the sun on our faces a stark contrast to the dimness of the basement. After a leisurely breakfast, Jay departed, leaving me to my own devices. My day unfolded as usual. I didn't bother to ask Anthony about the doorknob, it genuinely didn't seem worth the effort. The incident was a minor blip, easily dismissed. Most of that Saturday was spent outside the house, enjoying the freedom of a parent-free zone, hanging out with other friends. I returned home late, the evening winding down, the buzz of the previous night long gone. It had been a marathon day and I was utterly drained. A quick snack, a shower, and then straight to bed. When I say straight to bed, what I really mean is that I crawled into bed, grabbed the remote, and zoned out to an hour of mindless television, the gentle hum of the screen a soothing lullaby. The moment I hit the power button, plunging the room into darkness, it happened. A series of faint creaks and thumps from directly above, eerily similar to the sounds from the night before. They seemed to originate from the kitchen upstairs. I held my breath, straining to hear, my senses sharpening in the sudden quiet. The sound stopped. A ripple of unease, cold and unwelcome, spread through me. My heart began to beat a little faster, a nervous flutter in my stomach. I sat up, alert, listening, waiting for another sound, anything. The silence stretched, heavy and profound. Eventually, I relaxed, dismissing it as the normal settling noises of an old house, my mind overreacting, amplifying every subtle creak and groan. I couldn't have been more wrong. I should have trusted that initial flicker of alarm. The sudden movement of my bedroom doorknob was a physical shock, jolting me upright with a force that sent my blankets scattering. It was as if an invisible hand had reached out and grabbed me, pulling me from the precipice of sleep. The doorknob twisted, a low metallic groan, then ceased just as it had the night before. But this time it was different. This time a soft, deliberate knock followed, 3 distinct taps, gentle yet insistent. Then the doorknob moved again, a slow, methodical turn as if testing the lock, confirming its resistance. A chill, colder than any late-night draft, slithered down my spine. I didn't dare utter a sound, my throat suddenly dry, a tight knot of fear coiling in my gut. My eyes darted to my phone, a lifeline abandoned on the bedspread. My fingers fumbled, cold and clumsy, as I began to text furiously. Not just my parents, who were miles away and presumably fast asleep, but Anthony and Jay too. A desperate, illogical hope flickered within me, that one of them, by some miraculous chance, would text back, "Yeah, it's me." The chances were astronomical, practically zero, but the thought offered a fleeting, desperate comfort. My parents, as expected, didn't answer the phone. They weren't due back until Monday. There was no conceivable way it could be them. The thought of yelling, "Who's there?" felt ludicrous, a cliché from a horror movie, and far too dangerous. I slid out of bed, my movements agonizingly slow, each creak of the floorboard amplified in the oppressive silence. My eyes scanned the room, searching for a place to hide, a weapon. The large dresser in the corner offered a sliver of concealment, a temporary refuge. My hand closed around a heavy, blunt object, the forgotten baseball bat I kept tucked away for emergencies. The terrifying scenario played out in my mind. Whoever was out there, a phantom presence on the other side of the locked door, might kick it in, rush the bed. I braced myself, my body tensed, every muscle screaming with anticipation. 10 minutes. An eternity stretched in the dimly lit room. I didn't move, a statue carved from pure fear. No more knocks. No more sounds. Just the frantic pounding of my own heart, a drumbeat against my ribs. Finally, the primal urge for self-preservation clawed its way to the surface. My trembling fingers dialed 911. My voice, when it came, was a barely audible whisper, raw and choked with terror. I had to speak loudly enough to be heard, yet quietly enough not to alert the unseen presence beyond my door. "Someone's trying to get into my house," I choked out, the words catching in my throat. I stayed on the line, the operator's calm, reassuring voice a fragile anchor in the storm of my panic. Exiting the room felt like walking into a trap. "Can you tell the police to meet me at my bedroom window?" I whispered, my voice barely a thread. Thank God for the first floor. Moments later, a gentle tap on the glass. An officer, a silhouette against the oppressive darkness, peered in. I fumbled with the latch, pushing the window open just enough to pass him the key to the side door. The click of the lock, the muffled thud of the door opening downstairs. The sounds were a symphony of relief. Only then did I feel safe enough to leave the flimsy protection of my bedroom. 2 officers met me in the living room, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and professional detachment. I flicked on every light switch, banishing the shadows that had played tricks on my mind. My apartment was small, a compact space with few places to hide. The search downstairs was swift, thorough, and utterly fruitless. Nothing. The officers then led the way upstairs to the main floor of the house. Each room was a potential hiding spot, a new source of dread. I rattled off the purpose of each room before they entered, a whispered guide in the eerie silence. It was when they entered my parents' bedroom that I heard it, a sudden commotion, a raised voice, then another, a flurry of shouts and movement. About 30 seconds later, standing frozen in the hallway, I couldn't resist. One quick peek through the doorway. 2 officers, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, were yelling at someone under my parents' bed. A cold, hard knot tightened in my stomach. The sight was surreal, a nightmare made real. "Wait downstairs," one of the officers instructed, his voice firm, his gaze direct. I obeyed, my legs feeling like lead. Minutes later, they emerged from the stairway, a man between them. Tall, dirty, his face a mask of disheveled exhaustion. He wore a grimy sweatshirt and shorts. His eyes, fixed on me, burned with an unsettling hatred, a chilling intensity that I would never forget. He looked as if he could have been homeless or unhinged or perhaps both. The officers asked if I recognized him. "Of course not," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, still reeling from the shock of his malevolent gaze. Once he was out of the house, swallowed by the darkness of the pre-dawn street and the waiting patrol car, a colossal weight lifted from my chest. I felt a million times lighter, the suffocating grip of fear loosening its hold. The police advised me to follow up with the precinct if my parents or I wished to press charges. The first thing I did, the moment the police cars vanished down the street, was text every family and friends group chat I had, a frantic, abbreviated account of the night's events. It was late, impossibly late, and only a handful of early risers or fellow insomniacs responded. My parents, of course, were my first call the moment morning broke. Their reaction was a predictable blend of disbelief and horror. But because the man was clearly homeless and inexplicably nothing had been stolen, my parents opted not to pursue legal action. Their reasoning was pragmatic. What was the point? He had nothing to take and no permanent address to hold him accountable. The memory of that night, even now, carries a lingering, unsettling question. I've often wondered if I might have left the front door unlocked that night Anthony and Jay came over, a careless oversight in the chaotic wake of their arrival. Perhaps he had simply walked right in, unnoticed amidst the blare of music and the boisterous laughter. Or, a far more terrifying thought, he could have been in the house for much longer, a silent, unseen occupant, observing, waiting. And we, oblivious in our loud, carefree existence, had simply never known. The thought is a cold, creeping dread that refuses to fully dissipate. The quiet. I've always craved it, sought it out like a desperate parched traveler in a desert. 5 years ago, I found my oasis, a small, unassuming cabin nestled deep in the rural heart of upstate New York. It was an escape, a deliberate severance from the incessant hum and suffocating chaos of the city. Here, the cabin itself was ample, sprawling, but it was the vast, sprawling wilderness that truly held my gaze. The woods stretched out, an unending tapestry of greens and browns, far beyond the modest boundaries of my property. The nearest neighbor was miles away, a distant speck on the horizon. The only sounds that punctuated the profound silence were the whisper of the wind through the ancient trees and the occasional distant chirping of a bird. It was for a long time nothing short of paradise, and I cherished every quiet, solitary moment of it. Fishing, a meditative practice that demanded patience and a profound connection to nature, became my obsession. Most of my days were spent on the glassy surface of the lake that shimmered just behind my house, a tranquil mirror reflecting the endless sky. It was the perfect escape, a place where the anxieties of the world dissolved into the rhythmic casting of the line. I didn't just tolerate being alone, I thrived on it. The cabin boasted a huge deck, a weathered expanse of wood that offered an uninterrupted panorama of the woods. I'd often sit out there, a cold beer cradled in my hand, watching the sun dip below the jagged treeline, painting the sky in fiery hues. As twilight deepened, the nocturnal chorus of the woods would begin, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures, the gentle sigh of the wind. It was always peaceful. Until recently. It began subtly about 2 weeks ago. I was on the deck, a creature of habit, staring into the impenetrable darkness beyond the railing. Then a sound. A crisp snap of a twig in the distance. My mind, quick to rationalize, dismissed it. Deer perhaps. Or a raccoon. The woods were teeming with life, and over the years, I'd grown accustomed to the symphony of its inhabitants. But as the days bled into nights, the sounds grew more frequent, more insistent. At first, it was just those innocuous twig snaps, the rustling of leaves. Things I could easily attribute to the natural movements of animals. But then one night something new. A scratching sound. It emanated from the side of the house, somewhere near the spare bedroom window. It was faint, almost imperceptible, as if whatever was making it was actively trying to remain unheard, to be sneaky. I straightened in my chair, the sudden surge of adrenaline quickening my pulse. My heart pounded a little faster than usual, a nervous drumbeat in the quiet night. I waited, holding my breath, but nothing followed. Probably just a squirrel, I tried to convince myself, clinging to the rational explanation. But the feeling in my gut, a faint tremor of unease, persisted. The peaceful calm of the evening had been irrevocably fractured. I decided to go inside, securing all the locks, a precautionary measure that felt more like a desperate attempt to banish the growing sense of dread. The next evening it returned. The scratching. But this time it wasn't confined to the side of the house. It was closer, distinct, unmistakably coming from directly outside the spare bedroom window. I froze, every nerve ending tingling, my senses hyper-alert. The air grew heavy, thick with an unidentifiable tension. I couldn't explain it, but something felt undeniably wrong. A compulsion stronger than my fear drew me to the window. My hand, trembling slightly, pulled back the curtains just a sliver. Moonlight, diffused and ethereal, bathed the yard, transforming the trees into grotesque, elongated shadows. The wind was still, unnervingly so. Everything appeared normal. No animal. No human. I shook my head, a futile attempt to dislodge the tendrils of paranoia that were beginning to coil around my mind. It was probably just a branch, I rationalized, brushing against the glass, or perhaps the wind playing tricks. I convinced myself there was nothing to worry about, nothing at all, and retreated to my bed, hoping for the oblivion of sleep. The following night, the scratching returned with a vengeance. It wasn't just scratching anymore. Now it was accompanied by a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently, patiently attempting to get my attention. My heart skipped a beat, a cold lurch in my chest, and I sprang out of bed. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, sharpening my focus. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from my nightstand, its beam a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness, and crept through the silent hallway, my bare feet making no sound on the cool floorboards. The spare bedroom door loomed ahead, a dark maw in the gloom. When I reached the window, I swept the powerful beam of the flashlight across the exterior. Nothing. The same empty woods, the same dancing shadows. No person, no animal, nothing to explain the chilling sounds. But the feeling, the palpable sense of being watched, of not being alone, was overwhelming. The air around me felt thick, heavy, laden with an unseen presence. I retreated to my bed, but sleep was a distant, unattainable luxury. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of the wind, sounded amplified, distorted, like someone was moving stealthily through the silent rooms. I lay awake, listening, straining my ears, until sheer exhaustion finally dragged me into a fitful, shallow sleep. The nights continued, a relentless cycle of dread. The sounds became a nightly ritual, a tap, a scratch, sometimes even a faint, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to emanate from within the very walls themselves. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as the ramblings of an overactive imagination, but it was getting harder, the lines between reality and paranoia blurring with each passing night. One night, a desperate resolve solidified within me. I decided to confront it, whatever it was. Perhaps it was just an animal, a rogue raccoon, or some other nocturnal creature that had found its way inside. The thought, however flimsy, offered a sliver of hope. I ventured out to the shed behind the cabin, the cool night air prickling my skin, and retrieved a crowbar, its cold, heavy metal a reassuring weight in my hand. It seemed prudent, I reasoned, to have something, just in case things escalated beyond the mundane. I approached the spare bedroom, the door a dark, uninviting rectangle. I carefully opened it, the hinges groaning in protest, the sound echoing unnervingly in the silent house. The air within the room was stale, heavy, as if it had been untouched for ages. Months. I hadn't stepped foot in the spare bedroom in months. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive darkness, a narrow tunnel of light. I moved slowly, meticulously, sweeping the beam across every surface, checking every corner, under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. The room was utterly, disappointingly empty. I stood there for a minute, feeling foolish, an idiot in my own home, holding a crowbar as if expecting to fend off a phantom. It was just the same old room, empty, silent. But as I turned to leave, a faint glint of something caught my eye. The closet door. It was slightly ajar. A tiny crack, barely perceptible, but enough to send a cold ripple of dread through me. I didn't remember leaving it that way. My stomach plummeted, a sudden, sickening drop. Had someone been here? Had someone been inside my house? I slowly, deliberately walked over to the closet, each step a Herculean effort. My hand, clammy with sweat, reached for the edge of the door and pulled it open, slowly, agonizingly. Nothing. The closet was empty. But as I swept the flashlight beam into the deep, dark corner, I saw it. Something small, almost insignificant, caught on the jagged edge of the wall. A piece of cloth. Dark, torn, almost like a fragment of clothing. My breath hitched in my throat, a suffocating lump of fear. My mind reeled, a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. Someone had been here. Someone had been inside my house. Inside my private sanctuary. I backed out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I slammed the door shut, the resounding thud echoing through the quiet house, and frantically bolted it, as if a flimsy lock could truly keep out the unseen intruder. I couldn't stay in that house, not for another second. The suffocating air, thick with unspoken menace, pressed in on me. I stumbled outside, desperate for the cool, clean air to clear the fog of panic that had settled in my mind. The oppressive darkness of the woods, usually a source of comfort, now felt like it was closing in, a living, breathing entity. I tried to shake it off, to dismiss it as a trick of my overwrought nerves, a symptom of the isolation finally catching up to me. I slept on the couch that night, the baseball bat a cold, reassuring presence within arm's reach. But no sounds disturbed the stillness. No scratching. No tapping. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. The silence was not peaceful. It was unnerving, pregnant with unspoken threats. The next night, a fragile bravery took root. I decided to stay in my own bed. I wouldn't let whatever this was drive me out of my own home. But just as I was about to drift off to sleep, a familiar chilling sound. Tap, 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 against the window. I shot upright, my heart a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I snatched the flashlight, its powerful beam cutting a stark path through the darkness, and ran to the spare bedroom, not caring how loud my footsteps were, the creaks of the floorboards a counterpoint to the thumping of my heart. This time, when I pulled back the curtain, I didn't just see the empty woods. I saw a shadow. A human silhouette, standing just outside the window, barely discernible in the dim moonlight. I froze, my blood running cold, every muscle in my body locking up. My mind spun, a whirlwind of disbelief and terror. Who was that? What were they doing here? The rational part of my brain fought against the undeniable truth, but there was no denying it now. Someone had been outside my house. Someone had been watching me. And now they were standing there, a silent, menacing presence just beyond the glass. I stumbled backward, my hand shaking so violently I could barely grasp my phone. My fingers, numb with fear, fumbled with the buttons, desperately dialing 911. The operator's voice, calm and professional, was a distant echo in the storm of my panic. Someone's been outside my house. I choked out, the words catching in my throat, my voice barely a strained whisper. And I think they're still here. I rattled off my address, the numbers a meaningless jumble on my tongue. "We'll send someone out right away," she said, her voice reassuring. I hung up, my hand still trembling. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay here, not another second. As I turned to grab my jacket, a slow, deliberate creak from the hallway. Someone was moving. Through the house. My blood ran cold, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just outside. They were inside. I didn't hesitate. I flung open the back door, the wood slamming against the wall, and tore through the woods, the darkness a chaotic blur around me. Branches clawed at my face, roots tripped my feet, but I ran, a desperate, gasping flight, not daring to look back. My lungs burned, a fiery agony with every frantic breath. By the time I reached the edge of my property, the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers were a welcome beacon in the distance. I slowed, my body trembling, muscles screaming in protest, and hid behind a thick tree, watching the officers descend on my cabin, guns drawn, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. They searched the perimeter, their voices muffled and indistinct. But I didn't stick around to find out what they found or didn't find. I couldn't. I knew with a chilling certainty that whatever, or whoever, had been in that house, they weren't done. I wasn't safe there anymore. I haven't gone back. The cabin, a silent sentinel in the heart of the woods, still stands. but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it, the insistent rhythmic tapping against the window. I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted, but I know one thing for sure. They were waiting for me, and they're still out there. I was 15 in 2008, a relatively carefree teenager whose biggest concerns revolved around instant messenger chats and YouTube videos. That particular night, my parents had ventured out to the casino, leaving me and Abby, our good-natured black lab, home alone. It was late, around 11 p.m., the house quiet save for the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard and the low hum of my computer. Suddenly, Abby let out a series of sharp, urgent barks from the living room. My first thought was my parents, perhaps having returned earlier than expected. I waited, listening, but the barking continued, a crescendo of canine alarm, with no accompanying sound of the front door opening. After a minute or so, my curiosity, tinged with a faint unease, propelled me off my chair and into the living room. Abby was positioned squarely in front of the large windows that overlooked our driveway, her body tensed, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The outside lights were off and the night was pitch black, making it impossible to see anything clearly. I pressed my face to the glass, peering into the gloom, and saw only one car in the driveway, my parents' car, parked just as they'd left it. No other vehicle. I dismissed it, attributing Abby's distress to a neighbor's car door slamming or a particularly loud vehicle passing by on our main road. We lived on a busy street and late-night noises were a common occurrence. I returned to my computer, but over the next 5 minutes, a growing sense of unease began to prickle at me. I kept hearing faint, almost imperceptible noises around the house, and Abby would start and stop barking at irregular intervals, a broken symphony of canine alarm. I was about to get up again to try and calm her down, when I distinctly heard it, a soft knock or perhaps a rustling sound originating from the living room door. My heart fluttered, a sudden nervous tremor. I slowly, deliberately, made my way back into the living room, my eyes fixed on the door. Again, nothing. The windows revealed only the impenetrable darkness of the night. A prickle of fear, cold and sharp, began to spread through me. I was too scared to look through the peephole, a terrifying image of a distorted face staring back at me flashing through my mind. I double-checked the lock, ensuring it was secure, a futile gesture against an unseen threat. Just as I was about to retreat from the room, a sudden, insistent knocking erupted from the side door of the house. My mind raced, a frantic kaleidoscope of possibilities. Had my parents forgotten their keys, locked themselves out? Was someone trying to break in? Was there more than one person out there? I barely had time to process these terrifying thoughts when another sound, even more unsettling, reached my ears. The unmistakable sound of a doorknob being tampered with, a metallic shimmying from the basement entrance. Our basement, essentially a crawl space beneath the house, had a surprisingly hidden entrance. To reach it, one had to walk around the entire house, through the backyard and beneath the deck. It was a secluded, obscure access point, suggesting either intimate knowledge of our property or an extraordinary level of determination. Abby was whimpering now, her barks escalating into a frantic, high-pitched frenzy as she darted from room to room, a black blur of frantic canine energy, desperately trying to pinpoint the source of the threat. It felt as if the entire house was surrounded, besieged by unseen forces. The noises from the basement grew louder, then abruptly they stopped. My heart sank, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I stopped breathing, frozen in the sudden, profound silence, every fiber of my being straining, waiting for the next sound, the next terrifying clue. Then, quick as a whip, Abby hurtled down the stairs, her growls transforming into a maniacal, guttural roar that I had never heard from her before. Abby was a good-natured black lab, a gentle soul who had never so much as barked at a fly. But in that moment she sounded like a beast, a formidable protector. It felt like minutes, an eternity, that I remained frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. Finally, the primal instinct of fight or flight kicked in when I realized Abby's furious growling had ceased. I called her upstairs, my voice a shaky whisper, and locked the door that led to the basement from inside the house. I grabbed the home phone, I didn't have a cell phone yet, and with Abby at my heels, scurried into the closet in my parents' room, where one of our guns was stored. I sat there, the cold metal of the gun a strange comfort in my trembling hands, ready to call 911. Then the front door opened. Abby, her instincts overriding my terrified, "No," shot out of the closet. Seconds later, I heard the familiar, beloved voices of my parents. I rushed into the living room, my parents petting Abby, their faces etched with a mixture of confusion and concern as they looked at me. I spent the next several minutes, a torrent of frantic words, recounting the events of the night. My mom was horrified, her face pale with shock. My dad, ever the pragmatist, spent the next hour meticulously searching every corner of the house, inside and out, his gun held firmly in his hand. We found nothing. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. The next afternoon, a knock at the front door. My heart immediately skipped a beat, and I instinctively darted into another room, the lingering fear of the night before still a raw wound. My dad opened the door to find my Uncle Pete standing there, an envelope in his hand. Uncle Pete, the narcissistic creep of the family. He had a way about him, a subtle aura of discomfort that permeated every interaction. He mistreated my aunt, acted strangely around the kids and cousins at family gatherings. Nothing illegal as far as we knew, but just unsettling. Growing up, I always felt a bit anxious whenever he spoke to me. I can't recall any specific unsettling things he said, but his overall demeanor was disquieting. Even the adults in the family, after spending too much time with him, admitted he made them uncomfortable. I played softball, and his daughter, my cousin Kate, played in a league a few years below mine. I adored my cousin and always felt a pang of sympathy for her, having such a creepy dad. So, I'd often give her tips, or help out her team with pitching and fielding lessons. My mom and I, eavesdropping from another room, overheard Uncle Pete say something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home." I couldn't hear much else. Shortly after, I heard my dad slam the door shut. My mom and I peered out, our faces questioning. My dad, his face quivering with a mixture of anger and disbelief, explained. Apparently, Uncle Pete had been the one stomping around the house last night trying to get inside. He handed me the envelope. Inside, a thank you card and a gift card, a token of appreciation for helping his daughter with softball lessons. A night of abject panic and terror, all at the hands of my creepy uncle. My dad, during their conversation at the front door, had threatened him, words sharp and final. After that, we never really spent time with him again. When I think about this story now, I'm at least grateful for the perverse clarity it offered. I found out who was behind the incident. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it had been burglars, a ghost, or something far more sinister. I'm thankful Abby was there to protect me. She most certainly scared him off when he was trying to get in through the basement, her guttural growls a formidable deterrent. But even so, I'm still left with so many questions. What the hell was he thinking? Why did he need to drop that card off so late at night? Why didn't he get the hint that we weren't home when no one answered the front door? Why wouldn't he try calling the house first to see if we were even there? And worst of all, what would have happened had he actually gotten inside? The thought still sends a shiver down my spine.